Welcome everybody to another installment of the Q&A sessions, and I'm really excited about today because I missed yesterday. I was actually spending wonderful family time, but today I am really excited to get your questions and answers, and feel free to leave them below in the comment section or that little question mark below. And great to see you all. Thanks for joining already. And by the way, I'd love to know where you are coming from. So feel free to write what country you're coming from. It's really fun for me to see the different places around the world where people are joining in. So India, welcome. Sanjeev. I was just thinking about the Indian sweets that I had when I was in Bangalore. And I don't know the names of them, but they were the most amazingly tasty sweets. And maybe you could tell us what they are. Who knows? You probably have hundreds of sweets. But anyway, hey everybody, just let me know where you're coming from. Banff National Park, which I love. I've been there many times. BC, Canada, that's awesome. Forest Hill Tea, welcome again. Good to see you all. And also, only one person has taken me up on this. However, if you're interested, there's two little icons, two little faces, the smiley happy faces below. If you want to come live and ask your question live, then feel free. It'd be wonderful. And Sanjeev says, we're awaiting your visit in Delhi. I can't wait to go. Rio de Janeiro. Thank you, Alessandra. And Forest Hill Tea, which makes excellent product, is from Sri Lanka. Excellent. Zainab Hiccups. Hello. Hello back to you. Yusuf, welcome. So let's pull up our first question. Oh, okay, yes, Calgary from Soulful Lens. I've been to Calgary many times, and I really enjoy that city. Pakistan, excellent. Really, really good to see you, Zainab. Zainab Hiccups, what a great name. Okay, so let's begin, everybody. As usual, I get a lot of questions through social media, and a lot of questions that actually don't go they go unanswered after I finish the live. So what I'll do is I'll go through these. And by the way, that guy James, Canty Sweets from Bangalore. Maybe that's what it was. It was anyway. I have to get back to India. Question: when do I choose white balance? Because I actually have auto white balance and I use it. Can you tell me what is the difference and when I should use it? Thank you, Mark. Okay, so this is a great question. A lot of you probably are familiar with white balance. If you're using an Android or an iPhone, it's really not that big a deal because the native cameras in the iPhone and Android, they do the white balance automatically. So white balance is simply the shift of the yellow and the blue spectrum, and it's applied to your photos. It's something that you can apply, or you can apply afterward in your editing software to make a picture more blue or to make a picture more yellow. Now, that's not to be confused with tint or hue, which is usually on the green and magenta spectrum. So keep that in mind. However, with regards to white balance, if you're using a DSLR for the first time, or you're just getting into DSLR or mirrorless photography, or if you want to use custom settings in your iPhone or Android for white balance, then you would use advanced apps for your mobile device, such as Lightroom CC or any of the advanced camera apps where you can actually dial in a white balance the way that you want. However, in saying that, auto white balance 90% of the time gets the job done. So what I do is I just use auto white balance. Now, a lot of people say, well, pros shouldn't do that. They should dial in their white balance. And I would respectfully disagree in the sense that it's all dependent on your genre. So for example, if and when I do studio photography, I dial in my white balance to Kelvin. That is a very advanced white balance setting. However, if I'm doing street photography or travel photography or anything else, like for example, maybe wedding photographers, they should all be using auto white balance. And the reason being is you have to get the shot without spending the time and wasting the time in dialing in different white balance settings. So that's my advice, is use auto white balance unless you have time to actually alter that because your subject is not moving? That was a great question. Hope that made sense. Let me pull up the little question mark here. Can we fix out of focus images in Lightroom? Very difficult. If you have a very slight defocus, then what you can do is alter your image by using sharpness and a little bit of clarity and a little bit of dehaze, and that will help a little bit. But to be honest, there's no real way to rectify an image that was photographed with a bit of blur, meaning it was focused incorrectly or has a bit of blur. However, like I said, you can play around with a little bit of those three options: sharpening, clarity, and dehaze. And that will actually make your picture look a little bit better. Now, here's a really cool alternative. If you flip your picture to black and white, the defocus actually looks good. Now, of course, it's dependent on the subject matter. So keep that in mind. Whenever I made a mistake in my focusing, and that happens because sometimes I'd be doing street photography or travel photography, and I'm going on a taxi and I photograph out the window, it might be a little bit defocused. If I turn up black and white, it becomes really cool. Why is that? Because black and white photos lend themselves, ironically, to defocus, to slightly out of focus. It becomes a fine art shot. And I encourage you to give that a try, everyone. It's really fun to see how black and white photos can actually handle a certain amount of defocus or out of focus aspects. Great question. Okay, let me scroll through here. Let's see what we have here. Ingrida, I was just looking at your last Q&A session. What a coincidence. Greetings from Lithuania. That's awesome. And I'm not sure if I told you or it was someone else from Lithuania a couple days ago, but I spent 5 weeks in Lithuania when I was quite young, just getting out of university. And I was in Kaunas, and I was volunteering at an orphanage. And it was such a wonderful experience. I love your country. Okay. Parashuram. Hello, Mark, sir. How was the day? Well, it's wonderfully sunny today. And that's really great, even though I'm still wearing 2 jackets. It's cold, the air's cold, but at least it's sunny. So thank you for asking. Welcome, everybody. Hey, Mark, I could be getting the new iPhone SE, which is a single perfectly performing camera, as the iPhone 11, that's true. My question is, are the iPhone images as good as DSLR regarding editing and Lightroom? So, by the way, if anyone is wondering about the new iPhone SE, it's a brilliant device. It's very cheap. You know, that's relative, of course. It's cheap in the world of iPhones. It has a brilliant camera. The quality's insanely good. And all those things come together for a really, really good purchase. Now, your question is about is the quality just as good as a DSLR editing in Lightroom? It's a hard question to answer because a lot of times it's dependent on the subject matter. For example, a DSLR has usually a larger 24 megapixel sensor. The iPhone SE has a 12. But the interesting thing is the Apple developers have created the ability to not fake proper exposure, but they use something called deep fusion, and they have incredible ability to combine images, what we would call HDR. It's not exactly HDR. So at this point, I would say that the quality is definitely as good, even better, when you're viewing on a computer screen. Now keep in mind that 90% of all viewing of photos is on a computer screen. So, in saying that, I would suggest that you would probably get better looking photos upon first glance than your friend with the DSLR. Now, it's true that if you're really digging down into the pixels, that the DSLR will win. However, like I said, because most of our photos are viewed on a screen, I found that shooting with my iPhone 11 Pro Max, which has the same camera as the SE, the new SE, you are going to get some amazing photos because what they're doing with both optics and technology and AI is quite extraordinary. Awesome question. Okay, let's see what we got here. Soulful Lens. When taking nature photos, I have 2 batteries with me. I worry about running out of power. Okay, let's just see what the second part is. Thank you for doing that, by the way, because a lot of times I can't get the full question in. So if you have a question like Soulful Lens, if you could divide it into 2 so I can read it, that would be awesome. If you use the question mark thing. What do you carry? Extras, portable power bank. Yes, very good question. So if I'm photographing just with my iPhone, and by the way, that's becoming more and more of a reality because the iPhone 11 and the new SE is extremely good. Then what I have is what's called the Apple what's it called? I think it's called the Apple Power case. It's a case that Apple makes that goes on my phone, and it has a little bump on the back, and it extends the life of my phone by 1 or 1.5x, I think. And I use it all the time. It's well worth the money. I actually bought it for Japan and a couple of months ago, and it was brilliant. Then I took it as well to Mexico on that trip. It was perfect. Now, if I'm talking DSLR, that's a different story. What I do is I just invest in extra batteries. So, for example, for my Fujifilm system, I actually have about 5 or 6 Fujifilm or third-party batteries. Now, a lot of people say, Mark, well, is a third-party battery company safe? Now, what that means is a third party is it's non-Fuji or non-Canon. It is something that you would find on Amazon, for example. And the answer is it's tricky. So what I do, like for example, when I was looking to buy extra batteries that I wouldn't be using all the time, they're just spare back batteries for if I get in a real bind, then I will look for a Fujifilm battery, or you could do Canon, Nikon, that has really good reviews, like thousands of reviews on Amazon. And you can certainly buy the cheaper version. The only issue is that it's true, they are far cheaper. They're not going to last as long usually. And some camera manufacturers may take issue to you using such batteries with regards to warranty. But to be honest, I've used these third-party batteries my whole career, and there's never been a problem. Now, what I do is I use the supplied Canon, Fuji, Nikon, Sony batteries primarily, and these other cheaper third-party batteries I use as purely as a backup. So I don't use them all the time in my camera. So I hope that helped. Okay, let's see what we have here. My Nikon has a pre-manual mode in white balance other than auto white balance. Which one should I be using? And can you please, sorry, give me a second. And can you please explain it? Okay, a pre-manual mode in white balance other than auto white balance. That is something, I have a Nikon as well. I haven't come across that. Zainab, could you just, while we're on this this live Q&A, can you just go into your camera if you can, and just give me a little bit more information on what you're seeing? Because I know all about all of the white balance options. For example, of course, you would have you have tungsten, you have flash, you have fluorescent, you would have daylight, you would have cloudy, and auto. But I'm not sure what the pre-manual mode refers to. However, if you can give me a little bit more info, I can probably answer your question. Thank you. Okay, let's see what else we have here. I'm getting out of focus with AI servo mode while shooting moving subjects. Yeah, that's a little bit tricky because it should work. And I'm not sure why that would be the problem. So are you talking about sports photography, or I'm not sure why that would be failing, to be honest, because I've used that as well for moving subjects, and it's always worked. If you need any, always feel free to send me a screen capture of your image, or send me a low res, or send me a direct message if you want, and I can look at your photo, because I'm really not sure what's going on, because it should work. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Capturing animals. Okay. Yes, I'm not sure why that's happening. And like I said, feel free to send me an image and I can examine it for you. Okay, let's see what we have here. Richard, not sure if it's already been asked. Any tips on settings for photographing the upcoming meteor showers? So this is a really great question. And when you're photographing meteor showers, what we're trying to do is a really delicate balance between not getting the stars to be the normal stars, the non-shooting stars. We're not wanting them to be streaking. So that's why usually we stay within what's called the 30-second exposure window. Now, fortunately, most DSLRs and mirrorless cameras, when you're using aperture priority, they will have the ability, and shutter priority, by the way, it's really easy to capture an image within 30 seconds. Now, after 30 seconds, you usually have to do something called bulb or time. And that gets a little bit confusing and a little bit tricky. So here's a really easy way that I suggest that you get these meteor showers. You set yourself on a tripod. You use the fastest lens possible. And when I say fastest, that means the lens with the lowest f-stop number. And I would say that the 50mm f1.8 or f1.4 is ideal. And you set yourself to aperture priority, the lowest f-stop number possible, and the highest ISO number possible. And your exposure compensation should be a little bit to the minus side. Now, the reason why I suggest the highest ISO possible is because this is going to be for a test picture. What I want you to do is take a picture before the streaks of those meteor showers happen. And if you like the picture, then excellent. If you feel that it's way too bright, like those stars are really not looking good and the black sky looks grayish and dull, then what you're going to do is use your exposure compensation and go to the minus side and darken the picture down. And the reason why you have to do this is because the camera sees so much darkness. Like, most of the sky is dark, but we do have those small stars. You're going to go to the minus side, take a second picture, a test picture. And then when you have the stars looking great, these are the stable stars, and the sky looking good and dark, you are now ready to photograph these shooting stars. Now, what we want, ideally, and this is where your ISO can come in handy, is we actually want the stars to be able to streak across the sky, but still have proper exposure in the sky. That's why I want you to go to your highest ISO first, and then you're going to reduce the ISO in your tests. And hopefully you'll be able to, within the 2 or 3 test shots, get an idea of what's going to look good. So let me repeat that really easily. Aperture priority, highest ISO temporarily for your test shot. Then you can reduce it a little bit. Lowest f-stop number, wide open, and you're going to be going to the minus side on your exposure compensation. You have to use a tripod, and keep in mind that the 50mm f1.8 is the cheapest and the best quality combo that I know of. And the 50mm f1.4 is really good for that astro type photography. Excellent question. Okay, thank you so much, Richard. I'm just going to scroll through here, see if there's any others in the comment section. Okay. Sorry, give me a second. Cinderbug, what is the ideal ISO when it comes to shooting food? I was shooting food yesterday and tried not to use the ISO higher than 400, which forced me to use a wider aperture. I end up using phone pictures. Okay, so this is what I want you to do. I think you're referring to, you have a DSLR or a mirrorless. I want you to use a tripod. Whenever we're shooting food, we have to use a tripod. And the reason being, and you don't have to have an expensive one, even a cheap plastic one. Like, you can get cheap plastic ones from Walmart for $40. And the reason why that's okay is because all we're looking for is an ability to hold our camera at a specific angle And because you're indoors shooting food, you're not at risk of that cheap tripod moving or shaking because there's no wind inside. Okay? So, you're going to have for food, you're going to have a tripod. You're going to use the lowest ISO possible. You're going to use f8. You're going to be in aperture priority. And you're going to adjust the brightness with your exposure compensation. That's the minus and the plus dial. You're going to use autofocus to get the focus initially. And then if you feel that the autofocus is focusing on some aspect of the food that you do not want, simply switch your camera lens to manual focus and fine-tune that focus based on the portion of the food that you feel is best. Now, the reason I said f8 is because that's the standard default aperture for most things, because it's good and sharp, with good quality sharpness around the edges of the lens, the perimeter. However, if you want more depth of field blur behind the food, then you're going to choose a lower f-stop, say 5.6 or 4. If your food demands and requires a lot of depth of field sharpness because you also want to capture the table setting, like the forks, the knives, all that stuff, then you're going to go up in your f-stop numbers to f11 or f16 or even the maximum usually of f22. This is primarily a decision based on aesthetics. That background blur or that lack of background blur is you being able to alter the f-stop number, the aperture, to provide the certain amount of blur that you want. Okay? I hope that helped. By the way, I do upload these videos to YouTube, and that's Mark Hemmings Photography School within YouTube. So if any of these exposure recipes are, if you want to come back to them, you can always just go to my YouTube page and you'll see them. Okay? Excellent question, Cinderbug. Thank you. Srinivas, welcome, my friend. Christine Tomasic, welcome. By the way, if you're just joining, we're doing a live Q&A session, and happy to answer anything. Could be editing, video, photos, whatever. Zainab Hiccups, my Nikon has a pre-manual white balance. Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah, okay, pre-manual. So if I'm not mistaken, and this may just be, and I can go back and check this probably after we finish, this could be referring to the ability for you to create your own custom white balance setting. Now, I do this sometimes with my own Nikon. I shoot Nikon, I shoot Sony, Canon, and Fujifilm, and most all of them do have what's called a custom white balance. And what you do is you put a piece of white paper, you photograph a piece of white paper in this mode, in this white balance mode, and you tell the camera that this is pure white and you want it to be locked into that pure white. If that's what you're referring to, then I'm happy to explain it a little bit further. If this is not what you're referring to, I apologize, I'm not sure. So to dial in a white balance that you want, let's just say that you're in a really weirdly lit environment that has a lot of different types of light, and your auto white balance is not working. If you can get a white piece of paper or a white whatever, it could be a white sheet or a white shirt, and most cameras allow for this, you tell the camera within your white balance setting that this is a pre-programmed white balance that I want it to be locked in on for the rest of the shoot, for the rest of the photo shoot, and it will do that. And it's a different language or different terminology between each camera manufacturer, and maybe this is why I'm tripped up on this one, because I usually use Fuji mostly. But that's the case, and it's really useful. However, in saying that, I'll be honest, I don't ever use it. I use auto white balance when I'm photographing things that are moving really quickly, and when I'm in studio, when I'm doing studio work, I use Kelvin. Now, the Kelvin scale goes from 1,000 to 10,000 in most cameras, and I would judge my white balance Kelvin settings based on the type of lighting. For example, I have studio strobes, I have those studio lights, they're set at 5600 Kelvin. So I would set my own lights at 5600. Now, I also work in the movie industry. I would set if I had LED panels that were warm, for example, or that were lit by tungsten, then I would set my camera to something like 32 or 3600 Kelvin to make sure the camera mixes well with the type of lighting or the lighting temperature outside or in the studio. So those are the two things I use. I use auto white balance or Kelvin. Those are the two. I don't really need to program my white balance based on that white sheet, although it is effective for certain situations. Okay, Anitra, welcome. Let's go back to the question marks here. Sorry, I worded incorrectly. It's called the preset manual mode. Yes, that's exactly right, Zainab. That's, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that is exactly correct, where you pre-program the white balance, photographing a white sheet. Excellent. Thank you for that, that clarification. Okay, let's see what else we have here. How can we achieve the same effect like vibrance in Lightroom? My colors sometimes don't pop up. Okay, yes. So in Lightroom, there is a section called Vibrance, and it's not to be confused with saturation. So I want to explain this to everyone because Vibrance and saturation look or seem very similar at the outset. And by the way, Adobe products have the difference between Vibrance and saturation. Saturation makes all colors increase in that saturation look, that pop, but they do it at a uniform increased amount, and all the colors get increased in that vibrant pop at the same time. This is okay, but it's not ideal. That's why Vibrance is actually superior. Vibrance will selectively increase the saturation of certain colors that it feels needs to be increased, but will not touch, will protect or leave alone other colors that are already saturated enough. It's sort of, I would call it a smart saturation. And also, here's a little tip. If you have people in your picture, then what I suggest is that you don't use saturation in order to bring the colors up, that you use Vibrance, because Vibrance will intelligently not increase the vibrant saturation of skin tone. This is important because if you have someone with a reddish complexion, then when you increase saturation, their skin tone is going to look reddish and ugly. You don't want that. That's why Vibrance is better than saturation. Okay, I hope that helped. Thanks for the question. Okay, let's see what we have here. How can we get this? How can we get the same effect as Vibrance in Lightroom using camera? Oh, I'm sorry. In camera. Okay, without using Lightroom. Got it. Yes, they're called picture profiles, and every camera has a picture profile. At least I think, at least all the cameras I've ever used, the DSLRs and the mirrorless, have picture profiles, and you just have to do a Google search for picture profile 4, and then you add in your camera manufacturer's name, like the D700, D750, or the whatever. And you're going to find out how to access the picture profiles. Now, some cameras may use a different terminology than the words picture profiles, but most of them use that. And what you would do is you would change from the default picture profile that comes standard in all cameras, and you would choose the one that says vivid, or who knows, it could say something like more saturation. It's usually the word vivid. Now, these picture profiles come in names such as landscape, portraiture, vivid, black and white, and all those things. So I really encourage you to do a quick search, and you'll be able to radically increase that vibrancy that you're looking for without having to do that in your editing software. Excellent question. Okay. Let's see what else we have here. I'm going to scroll a little bit. Sorry for the delay. Okay. Due East Photography, welcome, my friend. Okay, here we go. And by the way, it's a little bit easier for me to be able to answer questions if they're in the question mark icon, if you have access to it. For some reason, it's hard for me to scroll Instagram. Okay, so let's go with this question here. What do you think of Samsung Note 10 Plus camera. I don't know much about it, to be honest, and mainly because I use iPhones, and I've never really been able to study what Samsung does and other manufacturers. So I don't know. However, I do have a good tip for you. If you go to DxO, I think it's called DxO.com. It's DxO, and they are a fantastic, very nonpartisan organization that tests the quality of cameras. And they do really good tests on mobile devices as well, such as iPhones, Samsungs. And I would suggest you do a little. They have the ability for you to look at that lens, that specific camera, and compare it to other Android devices. So, Soterios, I wasn't able to answer your question fully, but DxO is what you want. Hope that helped. Okay, Forest Hill Tea. What are the recommendations for product photography and taking pictures of wild tea forest and the natural biodiversity? Yes, so what's critical is golden hour. So that's right before the sun rises. Actually, let me back up. First, a little sip of tea. Interesting. Forest Hill tea. I'm actually not drinking your tea because I don't have any. But if I did, I would be drinking Forest Hill tea right now. So the question is about these, and this works as well for anyone who's working in the vineyards or working in farmland or whatever. What you want is magic hour. Now, magic hour is divided into blue hour and golden hour. Blue hour is before the sun rises. Blue hour is also after the sun sets. Golden hour is after the sun rises, and actually, and it's also before the sun sets. I hope I said that right. And this is when it's just the perfect lighting. What I would suggest is you get a tripod and you photograph when there's no sun. And what you're going to get is just this. But when I say that, no sun, I'm talking when the sun is just about to rise over that horizon. Get a tripod, photograph in that blue hour, and you'll have a golden tone to the distant horizon, but the atmosphere is blue. It's really a fantastic time. And I've photographed vineyards before, and that's what I did, is I waited for that wonderful time, either early in the morning or late in the evening, and you get the best pictures. Make sure you go to f8 or f11 as you're doing landscapes. Use a wide-angle lens, use a tripod, and in aperture priority, adjust your exposures using your exposure compensation dial. Now, you may also, if you're wanting to get into really good landscapes of your tea area of the farmland that you're in, then what you're going to want to do is get into HDR photography. That's high dynamic range, and that's where your camera will take 3, 5, 7, and 9 or 9 photos, and you can combine those different exposures into one single image within programs like Lightroom or Photoshop. Now, if your camera does have an internal HDR ability, and most newer DSLRs do have that, then the camera will do it itself. But you have to make sure that you're using a tripod and you are completely steady and it's not windy. If it's windy, put a bean bag or a heavy bag onto your tripod so it doesn't move around. I hope that helps. And by the way, I hope that and feel free to send me any of your photos that you take of the tea growing area, and I'd be happy to look at them for you. Okay, Richard, big wave to you. Welcome. And for anyone who's just joining, it's a Q&A session, and let me know if you have any questions at all. Alessandra, good to hear from you. Can you please explain how to fix the excess amount of light in the top of the head when backlighting? Yes. So what you would do is you would just lower the camera so that it's coming straight on. So it's so for example, like this instead of like this. Now you can't do anything about that if your backlighting is from the sun. You of course are at the mercy of where the sun is during the time of day. If you're referring to light that you are able to control, then you would have it lower and you would have it further back so that you're getting only a rim of light around the back of the person's head. And this keeps hot spots, like I have a hot spot right here because of the sun. That keeps hot spots away. Now, if you're referring to just outdoor portraiture, then there's not much that you can do, really. That's why people like portrait photographers like wedding photographers, for example, they try their best, and also family portrait photographers, to use low light. So that means when they're doing their backlighting portraits, which are amazing, by the way, the light is low enough in the sky that it's hitting this area and creating a nice rim of light, and it's not creating any hot spots on people's heads. Now, it's not that big a deal if you have a full head of hair, but if you're like me, then it is a big deal. So that's why you want to shoot outdoors with backlighting only when the light is low, or ask the person like me to wear a hat. Hope that helped. Okay, Cinderbug, will there be an artificial lighting course added? I would really love to do that someday. And the nice thing is that I really enjoy, I've had like 20 years of studio experience, and I don't do studio much anymore because I'm mostly traveling. However, studio work, which also refers to, by the way, the very inexpensive way to use off-camera flashes, they're called strobes. You can actually create your own studio, not necessarily spending thousands of dollars on studio lights, but using 2 or 3 flashes. And those are the flashes that you just put on the top of your camera. And it's a really good idea, and I should probably look into that. Thank you for the encouragement. Okay, Muzaffar, welcome. And those who are just joining, we're doing a Q&A session. I'd love to help you guys out. My Nikon is a D5600. Zainab says, yeah, I hope I answered your question. Amaranglizzi, pre-mode on Nikon you adjust with shooting white surface. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And even though I do have a Nikon, I'll be honest, I didn't know that exactly because I've never used it. I don't use it. I use Kelvin. But now that you know, yes, you indeed use that white sheet to help out. Okay, Soterios, what is your opinion for the Canon M50 camera? So I think it's great. You know, I've seen results. I've never touched it, to be honest. So I don't want to give you too much information, you know, if you go out and buy it and feel it wasn't for you. So I know that there's been criticism of it, and what I really need to do is test it out myself, to be honest. However, there's criticism of every new technology or everything, and you know, it's true that Canon and Nikon came a little bit late in the game with regards to mirrorless, so they have a few issues to work out. But from what I can tell going through the specs, I think it's probably a great option, and I would certainly use it. So if you have the option, then definitely buy one. You know, if you want to make sure that, if you want to be in the mirrorless world but stay within the Canon ecosystem, I think it's a great idea. Okay, welcome everybody. Good to see you all, and of course, feel free to ask any questions for those of you who just joined. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Thank you, it makes it more clear. I'm glad that helped. Cyprian, I'm using a Canon D90. How good is it for beginners? Well, yeah, it's great. You know, what I always suggest for everyone is never feel that any of your camera equipment is let me flip this backwards. I would prefer that you use the most inexpensive camera available and then max it out to the point where it's holding you back. So that means that you would keep using it, and until the point where it's holding you back artistically and technically, that's when you think about getting a new camera. So that means that any camera on the market today is perfect for anyone starting out in DSLR or mirrorless photography. Never spend more money on advanced camera gear that is way beyond, you know, what you'd ever need. It's a waste of money. And the reason I know this is because I test out cameras, and I test out a lot of cameras, in fact. And I've used the base Canon Rebel camera when I was in Mexico, and I got amazing photos from it. It's not about how expensive and how many gadgets are on the DSLRs. It's about composition and light, and of course, fundamentals like focusing. If I know that I can get amazing photos with the cheapest camera possible, I know that you can as well. And I just wanted to encourage you guys, don't go into debt to buy super expensive gear. You can create amazing photos with cheap gear. And then when you feel this gear is holding me back, that's when you invest in more expensive models. So I hope that is a bit of a help. Alessandra, what's the difference between profiles and presets? Great question. This is in Lightroom. A preset is older technology, and a lot of times presets were very popular. And in fact, professional photographers would sell them. And a preset is a recipe or it's not a recipe. It's actually a set of instructions that file, that instruction tells Lightroom or Photoshop to add a certain amount of changes to a person's picture. So one preset could say to tell Lightroom, okay, add 50% blue, decrease the saturation by X amount, and make the picture more soft focus or something like that. And that was okay. However, there's a lot of processing involved, a lot of computer work, and if you're on a laptop, then you're going to, eventually take your battery down a little bit. But the newer technology is called a profile. And both of these are available in Lightroom, by the way, both Classic and CC. And the profile is a far superior technology because there's hardly any computer processing happening by applying that profile. In essence, it's just like they slapped on a filter just on top of your normal picture, and it looks great, and it's super quick, and there's no huge amount of, like I said, computer processing happening. So what I advise actually is, because the profiles and presets are similar in their appearance, that you just choose profiles. They're very quick to use, and they're a superior technology. I love that question. Thank you. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Hi, Mark. Have you ever traveled to Africa? I've been to South Africa, and my destination, if anyone knows South Africa, it was East London, I think it was called. And I was there on a photo shoot, and it was very interesting because I was hired to do a portrait session all the way in East London, South Africa. And it was only for like a couple hours. So I got to see 2 days worth of East London and of course Johannesburg, but only just in the airport. Interesting little tidbit. The best cappuccino I've ever had in my life, ironically, was in the Johannesburg airport. And I have no idea why that would be. Very strange, but I remember it. Specifically Kenya. There's a lot to photograph here. You might want to consider visiting Kenya. I would love to. I would severely love to, in fact. Thank you for that. Welcome, everybody. And for those who just joined, we're doing a Q&A session. Feel free to ask any questions at all, and I'm happy to answer them. Murimi, hi. Cinderbug, always invest in lenses before buying a new camera. Yeah, lenses are fantastic because they hold their value. And the nice thing about lenses is that if you need to upgrade, you can sell your lenses for a far greater percentage. Well, let's just say the loss in your investment is much less when you're dealing with lenses than you're dealing with camera bodies. Okay, one of the reasons I started your online course was because you were using a camera that I've got. Tell me a few things and good characteristics of the camera EOS 7D. Yeah, the 7D is a APS-C format camera, and it's amazing. I've used it a ton. I've used almost all of the 5D series, and that's the full frame version. I've started out with 5D Mark II, the 5D Mark III, and now, of course, the 5D Mark IV. I don't have that. But if anyone's looking for used cameras, which I advise, if you can get a quality used camera from a reputable dealer, something like the EOS 7D is really good. The 5D Mark series, the 5D Mark II is quite old now, actually, but the 5D Mark III, which is a little bit old, but still very functional. We still use them, the 5D Mark IIIs. They still work perfectly. I would suggest that if you're into DSLRs and you want something a little tougher than the Rebel, then you get the 7D or any of the 5D Mark whatever series. Usually it's the Mark II or Mark III. I would say Mark III is a better option. Thanks for that reminder. Okay, Sheila, good to see you. Hope all is well. Uncorked NB, good to see you. We're doing a Q&A session, photography, and feel free to ask any questions at all. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Okay, how good is a Canon D90 for beginner? Cyprian, I think I already answered that. It's excellent. And if I didn't answer that already, I apologize. Okay, let's see what else we have here. This one I answered as well. I'm sorry, it's so confusing because Instagram doesn't tell me when I finished answering a question. Okay, here's one I haven't asked yet or answered. Cinderbug, I bought your Lightroom course, but I have Lightroom 6. Is the course still relevant to Lightroom 6? Okay, Cinderbug. Unfortunately, it's a different program altogether. And Lightroom now, after Lightroom 7, what they did was they divided Lightroom into two types. One's called Lightroom Classic, and Lightroom Classic is pretty much the same as Lightroom 7, except a little bit more advanced, and Lightroom CC. Lightroom CC looks different. It still has the same functionality, like it's doing the same tools to your images, but the layout looks different. So my advice is that if you don't want to invest in the Creative Cloud to get either Lightroom Classic or Lightroom CC, then just ask for a refund, because the Lightroom CC course that you bought from me is not gonna really serve you well, because the layout, or what they call the user interface, looks completely different. And if you bought it within 30 days, you can ask for a full refund, and just go to the support email address that you see in the course, and they will take care of you. Now, if you do plan to upgrade to the Creative Cloud, and then I would definitely suggest you transfer your collection from Classic to CC if you want to have the joy of being able to edit your photos on your iPhone, your Android, your iPad, your tablet, your Mac, your PC. The value of CC compared to Classic is that CC is internationally accessible, meaning you can be traveling, you can be in your car, you can be on a ski lift, you can be in a subway and still edit your photos remotely, because it's all cloud-based. I use it every day. I swear by it. I absolutely love it. However, I want to make sure that you get your money's worth, so ask for a refund if you don't plan on upgrading, okay? And thank you so much for that question. By the way, what she's referring to is my Lightroom course, which is found at markhemmings.com, and it's called Lightroom Editing Mastery. And it's a course teaching how to edit your photos and store them, and have the complete photographer's workflow using Lightroom CC. Okay, great question. Let's see what else we have here. Okay, Muzaffar. Hi Mark, what's your view on Sony Alpha 7 III or 7III? It's excellent. A lot of my friends use it. I haven't used it yet. I've used a couple different Sonys for doing time-lapse jobs. I've used the A6000s because they were cheap and they were easy to buy a whole bunch of them for time lapses. I do have friends who love the any alpha series they love. So I would say a big thumbs up, even though I just want to make sure that I tell you that I've never used that actual camera. But you'd be safe to purchase it if that was part of your purchasing plans. Great question. Okay. Oh, hey everybody. So I just want to let you know, everyone who's just joined, by the way, hey everybody, I'm doing a Q&A session. I'm nearing the end. Wow, I look terrible. I'm nearing the end because Instagram only allows, I think, 60 minutes. So I'm just going to please throw in a few more questions, and then I have to say goodbye until tomorrow. So I'm just going to scroll through here. See if we have anything else. Where are you based at? I'm currently based in Eastern Canada, and I've been based in various places around the world from time to time. However, now me and my family are in Eastern Canada, and it's a place called New Brunswick. If you're familiar with American geography, it's right next to the state of Maine, and we love our Maine friends. Okay. So let's just go for one more question. I'm going to say goodbye. What matters a lot? The number of focus points or the expansion of ISO? I'm asking this because I'm confused between the Canon 750D with 19 autofocus points or the 250D with 9 autofocus points. Oh, it's a great question. Don't bother. It's an absolute waste of time to be concerned about autofocus points when you're thinking about purchasing a camera, unless you're a sports photographer, okay? If you are a professional sports photographer, then yes, autofocus points are important. The nice thing is, even with small amount of autofocus points, you're still going to get excellent pictures. And I know this. I can say this with confidence because I use many different types of cameras in my work. I use Canon, Sony, Fujifilm, Nikon, and some of them have really basic autofocus point counts. They're very small, yet I always get good autofocus. So unless you are investing in a really good system because you're a professional sports photographer, or who knows, is any type of photography that involves really fast moving objects. For example, wildlife safari pictures. Yes, that would require, if you're a wildlife safari photographer, then you're going to want a lot of autofocus points, but don't worry about it. And the reason I know this is true is because I get great results from any camera that has any type of autofocus point count. Now, when you're deciding between two cameras, don't decide on the focus point and on the AF points. Decide rather on budget, on how much that system costs, and maybe a factor like how new is it. Okay, so that's the judgment that you should be using. The reason I suggest deciding about how new it is because newer technology, like new sensors, are brought out every single year. So that's probably how I would choose my camera, not based on the autofocus points. Great question. Okay, everybody, so I do have to wave goodbye. It was wonderful. And same time tomorrow, unless something happens where I need to be I was going to say I need to be somewhere else, but I'm not going anywhere, so it's most likely Toronto time, 1 p.m. tomorrow. And it's a pleasure talking to you guys, and it gets me out of the house in my backyard. I'm on a deck right now, and I'm not traveling very far at all. In fact, the only travel I do is once a week pretty much to get my groceries for my family. So this is a wonderful diversion, and thank you all for your great questions. Feel free to come back tomorrow. And by the way, as I said, I'm going to be posting all of these, and I have been posting all of these recordings up to my YouTube channel, which is Mark Hemmings Photography School. So feel free to check YouTube to see these after the fact, if there's anything that I said that you want to come back to. Okay, have a great day. God bless. Talk soon.